Hi everyone, welcome back to Make, Do, and Mend. This week's episode we're going to be focusing on clothing alterations. So the project that I've chosen to do a live demonstration of is taking a flannel shirt, much like this one, and making it a little bit shorter. The one that I have is kind of an awkward shirt dress length, and it just doesn't cut at the right spot, and it's a bit tighter on the hips. So I'm going to show you an alteration that I've already done to this shirt to try to make it a little bit more wearable, which is something that you could definitely do on another piece. But then I've decided that instead of having it a shirt dress, I'm going to shorten it up to sort of a tunic length. And that's what I'm going to work on today. So I will bring you over here. Please forgive my setup. I don't have my good tripod, so if you see this sort of awkward blue line in the bottom, that's a shoebox that my small tripod is resting on, and I really hope everything focuses okay. But I've done a little bit of preliminary work, but this gray plaid is the shirt that I'm going to be altering. And then the one that's underneath is the one that I'm sort of using as a bit of a pattern to make some decisions. So the first thing that I did when this shirt was a bit too tight around the hips was I went in and I unpicked all of this stitching and I just re-hemmed it to put this sort of side vent in. But it was still a bit awkward. I didn't really love the way that it fit. And I've had this shirt for about 4 or 5 years at this point. And I wanted to be able to wear it because it definitely fits my style. And I didn't want to just throw it out. So what I've done is I've used a shirt that I know I really like the length on and the shape of as sort of my guide. And what I did was just pin it, matched up the sort of length and pinned it to the other garment, and then added in basically a hem allowance because I know I'm going to have to fold this up twice, so it'll roughly be the same length as the shirt that I know fits me really well. So I already cut this piece off, and I'm going to use it for a guide for cutting this side, because I want both sides to match evenly. I'm going to flip it so the wrong sides are together. And when you're doing this, you'll have to make a couple of other decisions as well. Like, for example, I didn't want to be cutting right in the middle of where a button was going to be. So I moved up my line just a little bit so that it was a better match. And then I'm going to keep, there's some spare buttons and the button from the bottom. I'm going to keep those in case I ever lose a button that's on the garment. But these should match up pretty exactly. And just cut that off. And the middle part of the shirt, there's going to be a little bit more decision making that has to be made because this is a different size than the shirt that I'm using as my template. That one's quite a bit boxier, and this one is a lot more tapered. So what I've done is I've marked the center points. I'm going to mark it a little bit darker so that you can hopefully see on camera. Yeah, you can sort of see that, right? And then I just used a ruler to draw a second line up. Normally you would want to use a pen like this that's going to wash off with water, or one like this that's erasable with, it's got like its own erasing ink in the back. But these don't show up very well on camera, so I'm just using like a permanent pen just to show you a little bit clearer. And so I know that I like the shape of this curve, but I also want to make sure that it's going to match up at a nice point with the rest of the shirt, so like the front sides of the shirt. So what I'm going to do is actually bring this in a little bit so that see the way it sort of flattens out as it's going to the side seam there? I want more of that curve on the side of my garment. So I know that this is my center, and I know that I can pull both sides towards the center and keep this middle part kind of how I want it on this shirt, but keep the side parts matching up where I want them on the front and back. So I'm gonna fuss over some decisions here until I've got these sides pretty much matched up. And now these are both garments that I've had for a while, so the fabric can be kind of distorted or stretched. So if your centers and things aren't matching up completely, just try to make it as even as possible on both sides. And then don't forget that we added some allowance, that sort of about an inch allowance on either side. So I'm going to draw a kind of dotted line that matches up as best I can. If I taper in a little more or a little less, it's not the end of the world, but you do want it to look as even as possible. There's going to be some kind of lumps and inconsistencies because the fabric distorts and stretches as it ages. And one thing that I'm hoping to be able to do out of some of the leftover pieces is make myself a matching mask, but it looks like I should be able to fit my mask pattern onto this bottom piece, so it's awesome. And now I'm going to cut this. I'm going to go from this side. Might be a slightly less awkward angle. There's a rolling exercise ball underneath this table, and it just keeps hitting me in the leg every time I come over here. Our floor is like just slightly crooked, and it's not ideal for storing an exercise ball on. And what you can do to try and keep your curves as matched as possible is this, but you do want to factor in. So this is stretched quite a bit. So I don't want to do that actually, because I'm not going to rely on the green. I'm going to rely on my eyes and hope for the best. I can feel how much the fabric is off grain. So when you pull fabric this way and this way, there's not always a ton of stretch, but when you start pulling fabric this way, that's the bias, and that's where a lot of the stretch is gonna live in a piece of fabric. So my main concern is that the length is gonna be the same on both sides, and that matches up within like a millimeter or two, so that is fine by me. But these curves look totally different because of the way that this fabric has stretched over time. So I'm gonna double check that once I take my pattern piece out. One thing you need to keep in mind when making alterations to a shirt is that garments are constructed in a certain order, and when you start deconstructing a garment, you're not necessarily wanting to change the last thing about it that was sewn. So sometimes you might end up having to undo more than you kind of bargained for, just to achieve a sort of consistent result. So for example, when I was taking out this side seam, I ended up taking out all the way up to the underarm, because the way that these seams were finished was, it was like double stitched. So I had to undo it all in order to get these seams flat and be able to press them open. So, okay. Got our fronts matched up pretty well. A little bit of a discrepancy from the distortion in the fabric. And then our backs, I'm gonna have to even out, I think. There's some oddities happening where one side is really scooped and one side is really convex. So I'm gonna have to make the decision to go with this, because I don't want one side of the shirt looking way longer than the other. But I want to make sure that I'm matching up as much of the shirt as I can, so that it doesn't become this sort of awkward mess. And I'm going to pin these together so that I don't lose what I've matched up here. Actually gonna do this. It's gonna get a little bit shorter, but it's already substantially long top, so we're good. And now the back is gonna be a little bit longer than the front, but that's okay. That's the way I like my shirts, because I just wear everything with leggings, and that is okay. So we're going to go over to the iron. Hopefully you'll be able to see that all right. Actually, I'll bring the shoe box over. There we go. Okay. So check that my iron is nice and hot. It has an automatic shut off, so if I don't use it for a few minutes, it cuts out. And I'm just gonna do, I think, one of these seams just to show you. So you want to press about 1/4 of an inch down, and you just want to go one section at a time. So hold your iron down for a few seconds, pick your iron up, move to the next section, and contending with these curves, you're going to have to kind of smush it a little, which I don't think is the technical term. Ease is the technical term, because some of the pieces are pressing into a curve that's larger than itself, and some of the pieces are pressing into a curve that's smaller than itself. So that's the first fold of the hem, but you want to do a double fold just so that everything is nicely finished and holds its shape really well as it's hanging. If you have a too flimsy of a hem, you'll often end up with it kind of getting that lettuce leaf edge, which, you know, when it's a look, is fine. But when you want something that's like crisp and professional looking, then that's not ideal. And so you can see here, coming around this curve, it's kind of hard to ease everything into place. You just kind of have to make it do what you want, because it does have that bias stretch. It can be pretty forgiving. I'm going to grab a couple of pins. This would be something where sewing clips would come in really handy, because then you're not going to get any distortion in your hem. But I'll just pin these carefully so that it stays in place just to get it to the sewing machine. All right, and let's head over here. Prime view of the sewing machine. I just have it on a straight stitch. I'm going to make my stitch a little bit longer than the standard. Mine defaults to, I think, 2.2 millimeters. And I'm going to put it at 2.8. And I'm also going to move my needle position so that I can use the edge of my presser foot as my guide for my hem. Just a little. And always want to start with a back stitch. Keeps everything nice and secure. And as you're going through these curves, sorry if I just blocked the shot there. As you're going through these curves, you want to make sure that you're not forcing the fabric through. You never want to pull or push, especially because this fabric is a little bit distorted. And then just make sure your edges are nicely matched up. Go not quite off the edge, just all the way to the edge, and then back stitch a couple of times. And then I have a locking stitch, which is really handy because it kind of makes a little knot for you. And there we go. We have a new hem on the shirt. I'm going to press it so that that doesn't get so distorted. And that's about it for today. We're coming up with some different ideas for the next couple of weeks. I'm thinking of maybe some stuff that's not sewing related, maybe related to some other tools that we have at the tool library. So drop a comment down below. Let us know what kind of videos you'd like to see on Make, Do, and Mend. And don't forget to tune in to our backyard caring live streams every Wednesday at 3. This week looks like we're going to be doing some maple tree tapping because the weather is supposed to get a little bit warmer throughout this week. And starting next week, those kits will be available for borrow in our inventory. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.